They say every village in the heart of West Africa holds stories that do not age. Stories that live in the wind, linger in the dust, sleep beneath the roots of ancient trees, and rise again whenever someone dares speak their names. Maduma village was such a place. To strangers, it was a quiet land of mud-walled homes and endless grasslands stretching beyond the horizon. But to the villagers, Maduma was a delicate bridge between the world they could see and the world they could only sense. It was said that every century, the spirits stirred. Every lifetime, the earth remembered. And every generation, one soul, chosen or doomed, became part of a story whispered only when the moon hid behind clouds. This is one of those stories. One that began with a poor maid whose life was so small, so fragile, that she never imagined the unseen world even knew her name. Her name was Layo. She had been born into humble circumstances, raised briefly by parents who loved her until a fever swept through Maduma and took them both within days. She barely remembered their faces, only their gentle voices, their calloused hands, and the lullabies sung at dusk. After their deaths, she drifted like a leaf carried by shifting winds. Some villagers sheltered her for a week, some for a month. But food was scarce, mouths were many, and hardship made generosity brittle. Over time, people stopped offering space by their hearths. They only offered chores. And so Layo grew into a young woman who served others by day and slept wherever she could by night. Eventually, she found her place beneath the ancient baobab tree at the edge of the village, the tree called Ngomi. The elders warned children not to play near it and adults not to linger under its shadow after dusk. They said the tree was older than the first ancestors who settled the grasslands, older than the stories carried by the griots, older even than Maduma itself. Some called it a guardian, others a prison, but all agreed on one thing. Nothing touched the roots of Ngomi without consequence. Yet Layo had nowhere else to go. Every night, as the last cooking fires dimmed and the wind grew sharp, she curled herself beneath the baobab's massive trunk. Its thick bark curved just enough to block the worst of the cold. She would pull her faded wrapper tightly around her body and whisper prayers that no harm would come to her. But every night, something felt wrong. Sometimes, she sensed warm breath on the back of her neck when the air was completely still. Sometimes her skin prickled as though unseen eyes studied her in the dark. Other nights, she heard footsteps circling her, soft, slow, deliberate. Yet when she looked up, there was only the moon, pale and distant. In the mornings, she would rise to find the soil freshly disturbed, small shallow impressions surrounding the spot where she slept. She rubbed her eyes, telling herself she imagined it. That loneliness and exhaustion were twisting shadows into shapes. Still she felt watched. She felt remembered. Far from Maduma, in a sprawling mansion surrounded by electric gates and guards, a man was losing sleep for reasons he couldn't understand. Adewale Kasim, known throughout the region as a self-made billionaire, had begun dreaming of a tree he had never seen. In those dreams he stood in darkness, watching a girl curled beneath glowing roots, her face half illuminated by blue light rising from the earth. He saw her tremble, saw her whisper, saw her fear something he could not see. He always woke the same way, with his chest tight, his breath uneven, and a sense of being summoned from someplace ancient. He tried ignoring it. He tried burying himself in work. But the dreams grew stronger, so vivid that he could smell the red earth and hear the pulse of something alive beneath the ground. Back in Maduma, life went on. Children fetched water from the river. Women pounded millet into flour. Men returned from long days in the fields. And the village griot, a thin elderly man with silver hair and a staff carved with symbols, sat near the marketplace, humming a tune few recognized. He alone noticed how the wind changed when Layo walked by the baobab, how the tree's leaves shivered even when no breeze touched them, how the soil beneath Layo's sleeping place sometimes pulsed like the heartbeat of a giant sleeping under the earth. Great trees witness great fate, the griot murmured one evening as he watched her from afar. And nothing sleeps under Ngomi without reason. But no one asked what he meant. Then came the night when everything changed. The air grew heavy, so heavy that even the lantern flames inside the village flickered weakly. The moon dimmed behind a veil of thick clouds. A cold like breath from deep underground drifted across the village, raising goosebumps on every arm. Layo lay beneath the baobab, unable to sleep. Her heartbeat seemed louder. The air tasted metallic. The ground beneath her felt awake. Then she heard it, a low hum, faint but ancient. It vibrated through the roots, into the soil, and up into her body. Her eyes flew open. The baobab glowed faintly, blue light leaking from cracks she had never noticed before. The earth trembled. And then she saw it, a tall, shadowy figure standing between the roots, its form shimmering like smoke. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It only watched her with eyes that glowed like two small moons. She couldn't scream. The air clung to her throat. And then, just as suddenly, the shadow vanished. That same moment, hundreds of miles away, Adewale shot up in bed, gasping. He had seen Layo's face clearly for the first time, heard her whisper, felt her terror as if it were his own. He swung out of bed so fast that his lantern toppled. Something was calling him. Something ancient. Something alive. He grabbed his keys and ran out into the night. Meanwhile, Layo sat trembling beneath the glowing baobab. Her breath came in small bursts. She pressed her palm into the earth, whispering desperate prayers. But the humming grew louder. The ground vibrated again, harder this time. A voice rose from the soil. "You have been chosen." Layo froze. Her heart thudded painfully. "You have been chosen," the voice repeated, deep and layered, echoing as though spoken by multiple spirits at once. The roots beneath her surged with light. Then the earth split open. She screamed, but the sound vanished into the air, swallowed by the force rising beneath her. Blue flames spiraled up around her body, cold and fierce. The roots wrapped around her legs, not painfully, but with the finality of something claiming what belonged to it. The shadow stepped out again, this time fully formed. It stood tall, its translucent body swirling with symbols of forgotten languages. Its eyes blazed brighter than before. "You are the last daughter of the oath," it said. "And tonight, the oath must be fulfilled." Layo shook her head violently, crying. "I don't understand." But the spirit only stepped closer. "Your ancestors promised a soul to guard the Ngomi tree for 100 years. They ran from their duty. You cannot run." The roots pulled harder, dragging her toward the widening crack in the earth. Just then, a distant roar cut through the night. A vehicle. Adewale's truck crashed into the clearing, skidding to a stop. Dust exploded around him.
He stumbled out, breathless, eyes wide with shock as he saw Layo suspended by glowing roots, the spirit standing over her. He ran toward her. "Let her go!" The spirit turned slowly, its gaze piercing him. "You, the one who carries the blood of the Oathbreaker." Adewale froze. "What?" The griot appeared at the edge of the clearing, leaning heavily on his staff. "Your great-grandfather was the chosen guardian," he shouted over the rising wind. "But he fled." The spirits waited for one of his bloodline. Adewale fell to his knees as the truth crashed into him. "My family caused this?" The spirit's voice rumbled like thunder. "Balance must be restored." Layo cried out as the roots tightened further.
Adewale stood again, voice breaking. "Take me instead. Take me, not her." The spirit hesitated. The blue flames dimmed. The roots loosened. But before hope could form, the baobab trunk exploded open with a deafening crack. A second spirit stepped out, larger, darker, its body a storm of swirling shadows. Its voice shook the earth. "The oath requires the chosen, not substitutes." The wind roared. The ground split deeper. Layo screamed as the second spirit raised a hand made of shadow toward her. Adewale leaped forward, covering her with his body. "Then take us both." The second spirit roared. Blue fire erupted. The world went white. When the blinding white faded and the night slowly reclaimed its darkness, the world did not breathe immediately. The air held still, suspended between life and silence. Even the insects dared not chirp. Dust drifted downward like slow-falling ash. Smoke curled weakly from the split trunk of the ancient baobab, glowing faintly from within as if its very heart still burned with spirit light. Then, movement at a small, trembling hand pushed through the dust. Layo. She dragged herself upward, her arms shaking, her lungs fighting for breath. Her vision blurred. Her ears rang. She felt as though she had fallen from the heavens and landed back into her own body. Her knees buckled beneath her, and she collapsed onto the ground. The earth was still warm, too warm, beneath her palms. Blue light flickered softly under the soil, fading in and out like the dying breath of something ancient. Layo lifted her head, eyes swollen with tears, and scanned the clearing. "Adewale." Her voice was a broken whisper. "Adewale?" Nothing answered her, only smoke drifting in slow spirals. Only the faint glow outlining a human shape on the ground. A perfect imprint burned into the soil, as though someone had stood there moments before and their presence had seared itself into the earth. Her stomach dropped. her breath fractured. No, no, she crawled forward, dragging her shaking body across the dirt until she reached the glowing imprint. She placed her trembling hands on it, feeling warmth that should not exist. The warmth of someone who had given everything. Someone who had stepped into death willingly. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. No, please, please. Her voice dissolved into sobs. Footsteps approached behind her, slow, heavy, and burdened with grief. The griot stood at the edge of the clearing, his carved wooden staff glowing faintly from where spirit light had touched it. His wise old eyes softened with sorrow when he saw the broken girl. Kneeling at the spot where Adewale had stood, he lowered himself onto one knee beside her. Child, he whispered, voice thick with sadness, the spirits have taken what they were owed. Layo shook her head violently, her tears falling onto the glowing soil. He came for me. Why would they take him? The griot placed a trembling hand on her back. He carried the blood of the one who fled. The debt belonged to him, and he paid it with his life, not just for the tree, but for you. Layo pressed her forehead against the soil, her breath shuddering. He didn't even know me. The griot closed his eyes. Some souls meet only once, but they meet because destiny binds them in ways we do not see. Silence settled over them again. Heavy, aching, sacred point one by one, villagers appeared at the edges of the clearing, drawn by the explosion of blue light they had seen from afar. Mothers gasped. Children clung to their fathers' legs. People muttered prayers, crossed their arms over their chests, and backed away in awe. No one approached the baobab, not after what they had witnessed. The once mighty spirit light within the tree dimmed until it became nothing but a tired pulse beneath the bark. The roots, once glowing fiercely, now lay still. And the spirits, those ancient watchers, fell silent. The debt had been paid after generations of waiting. In the days that followed, Maduma village changed. Women came to Layo with bowls of food and fresh cloth for her clothing. Men brought thatching reeds and helped build her a small hut near the center of the village, so she would never again sleep outside. Children watched her with wide, curious eyes, whispering that she had touched the world beneath the earth and returned alive. The griot visited her often, sitting with her in quiet companionship. Sometimes he told her stories. Sometimes he simply sat in silence, listening to the wind. You carry part of him now, he told her one afternoon. Not in your blood, but in your destiny. Layo swallowed hard and nodded, though her eyes remained clouded with grief. Because despite the comfort and respect the villagers gave her now, she felt hollow inside, like someone had carved out a piece of her and left an echo in its place. She did not speak of Adewale often. The words hurt too much. But every night, after the village fell asleep, she walked alone to the baobab tree. The clearing was always quiet, always still, always watching. She knelt by the faint glowing imprint in the soil and placed her hand gently over it. Some nights she whispered prayers. Some nights she cried softly. Some nights she simply closed her eyes and breathed. And on certain nights when the wind blew from the east or when the moon hung low and red, she felt something beneath her palm. A pulse. Slow, steady, warm, not threatening, not frightening, just there, as if someone was watching over her, as if someone refused to leave her completely. Seasons passed. The harvest flourished more than it had in years. Rain fell gently instead of washing away the fields. Livestock grew stronger. Children slept through the night without nightmares. Villagers whispered among themselves. The tree is calm now. The spirits are satisfied. The guardian watches. They believed Adewale's sacrifice had awakened a new balance, had restored what was broken a century ago. And Layo became part of that belief. People came to ask for her blessing, her advice, her presence at important ceremonies. She never claimed power. She never claimed knowledge. But she spoke with a quiet wisdom that made villagers feel safe, guided, protected. The griot often smiled softly as he watched her. Some stories, he would say, are written long before the people in them are born. Years later, the world had changed, but Layo remained a constant presence in Maduma. Her hair had grown longer and was now streaked with signs of adulthood. Her posture was more confident, her voice steadier. She had learned to live with the ache inside her chest, an ache that softened but never vanished. One evening, during the season when the grass turns golden and tall enough to dance with the wind, she returned to the baobab tree once again. The sky burned with sunset colors, orange, red, deep violet bleeding into each other like an artist's brushstroke. The tree stood tall and silent, its bark healed but etched with faint glowing lines that only appeared in the last light of day. Layo stepped forward, her feet brushing through soft dust. She placed her hand on the trunk. It was cool to the touch, but beneath the surface, she felt something familiar. A warmth. A presence. She closed her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. The leaves above rustled softly, though there was no wind. Her lips curved into a small, sad smile. She knew he was there. Not as flesh, not as shadow, but as something eternal, woven into the very roots of the tree. The villagers would tell her story for generations. They would speak of the maid who slept where no one dared sleep, the girl who survived the spirits, and the man who gave his life to protect someone bound to him by destiny. Children would sit at the griot's feet and listen with wide eyes. Elders would nod wisely. Travelers would carry the tale beyond Maduma's borders. But the griot always ended the story the same way, leaning forward, lowering his voice, letting the wind swallow his last words. When the spirits call again, who will have the courage to answer? Time flowed through Maduma like a slow-moving river, soft, steady, patient. But some memories never drifted away with it. Some remained rooted like the ancient baobab that watched over the land, its branches spreading wide like arms, shielding the village from something only the oldest spirits understood. Layo's memory was one of the things time could not erase. As seasons changed, the villagers continued to feel the subtle ways the world had shifted. The night winds no longer carried unsettling whispers. Harvests grew fuller. Infants slept peacefully. Hunters reported that the forest paths no longer felt heavy with unseen eyes. Maduma breathed easier. And always, at the center of this quiet new balance, stood Layo. She moved with an aura the villagers could not explain, all softness and strength, loss and purpose woven together like threads of a single cloth. People greeted her with respect now, not out of pity as before. Mothers invited her into their homes. Children ran to her, or with stories. Elders consulted her before making decisions. Layo, once invisible, had become the heart of Maduma. But she knew her place was not inside the warm bustle of the village. It was at the edge, where the grass bowed towards the baobab, where the world of spirits breathed closer to the human world. She went there each evening, no matter how busy the day had been. Some said it was grief. Some said love. Some said destiny. But Layo herself did not know what tied her so firmly to that place. Only that when she stood before the tree, she felt whole again. The clearing had changed since the night of the sacrifice. The soil was always warm, the air always calm. Animals avoided the area unless Layo was present. Birds perched on the branches only when she stood beneath them. Even the insects moved with quiet reverence around her. Spirit light had faded from the cracks in the bark, but in certain moments, when the twilight deepened or when the wind held still, she could see faint blue patterns glowing softly beneath the surface, like veins carrying memories instead of blood. Layo placed her palm against the trunk. "I know you're still here," she murmured. The baobab gave no answer. It never did. But sometimes the warmth beneath her hand shifted, small, soft, rhythmic, like a sleeping heartbeat kept deep inside ancient wood and soil. She closed her eyes, letting the silence wrap around her. She breathed in the scent of dust and distant rain. She felt the weight of the world slow to a steady, thoughtful rhythm. She missed him, not with the wild grief that had once torn through her chest, but with a quiet ache that never left, an ache stitched into her soul. Adewale had stepped into the darkness so she could step out of it. How could she ever forget that? Sometimes she wondered if he knew, even before. Arriving at the tree, that his fate had already been sealed, that the spirits had been calling him long before he understood, that his dreams were not warnings, but invitations, pulling him toward a destiny written long before he was born. The griot seemed to understand this better than anyone. He visited her often, leaning on his carved staff, his silver beard catching the evening light. "You walk with memories heavier than your years," he told her once. "But you walk upright. That is strength." Layo smiled faintly. "I walk because he cannot." The griot looked at her with the softness of a man who had carried his own losses long ago. "He walks," he said quietly, "just not in the way you expect." Layo had carried those words with her ever since. Years passed. Children who once played barefoot in the dust now walked with the confidence of adolescence. Couples who once sought her blessing now carried babies on their backs. The griot's voice grew slower, softer, touched with the fragility of age. and Layo herself matured into a woman with steady eyes and a calm presence that made even troubled hearts feel lighter. But she never left Maduma, and she never abandoned the baobab. One particular evening, the kind where the horizon burns with gold and the clouds float like scattered embers, Layo walked towards the clearing with a woven basket on her arm. She liked to weave in her spare time now. It kept her hands busy and her thoughts grounded. Today she brought a small offering of flowers and herbs, tied together with braided grass. She reached the baobab just as the sun dipped low. The shadows stretched, long and soft, across the clearing. Birds flew overhead, their wings glowing in the orange light. Layo knelt at the base of the tree, placing the offering gently against the roots. "For balance," she whispered. "For peace." But then she paused. Something was different. The ground trembled, not violently, not with danger, but subtly, like the earth shifting its weight. Layo looked up, eyes widening slightly as she saw the patterns on the bark glow. Not faintly this time, but more clearly, more deliberately. A line of blue light pulsed upward from the roots, like a spirit exhaling beneath the surface. "Are you awake?" she whispered. The tree did not move, but the light flickered again, warmer, steadier. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew this feeling. It was the same warmth she had felt beneath her hand years ago, the warmth that reassured her she was not alone, the warmth that reminded her of the man who had given everything so she could stand here today. A tear slid down her cheek. "I miss you," she said, her voice trembling. "I hope the spirits gave you peace." The wind shifted gently, brushing past her face like a soft touch. She closed her eyes, smiled through her tears. Some spirits didn't need to speak to be heard. By the time the sun fully set, Layo remained seated before the baobab, her basket beside her, her hands resting calmly on her knees. Fireflies began to flicker around her, creating small drifting lights. The village behind her grew quiet, lanterns glowing warm behind distant mud walls. The griot's voice rose faintly in the wind. He was telling stories to the evening children again. Layo knew one of those stories would be hers, or Adewale's, or the trees, or all three woven together in a single tale about courage, destiny, and the price of balance. And she did not mind. Stories were meant to be shared, especially ones written in sacrifice. Eventually she rose to her feet, brushing the dust from her wrapper. She placed her hand on the baobab one last time. "Rest. I'll come back tomorrow." The patterns on the trunk glowed softly, just once, as if replying. Layo smiled and turned toward the village path. Behind her, the baobab stood tall and silent, its ancient branches stretching into the twilight sky. Deep beneath its roots, something stirred, not in anger, not in hunger, but in watchfulness, in guardianship, in the quiet, patient strength of a soul that had taken on a duty no ancestor before him had fulfilled. And though the villagers of Maduma would continue to live their lives, never again fearing the spirits or the night wind, the griot would always end the tale the same way, leaning close, lowering his voice, letting the final question sink into every heart. "When the spirits call again, who will have the courage to answer?"